What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Johners. This is episode 110, and this is a special WWE Elimination Chamber pay-per-view review. So, got a really special guest on the line. This individual's not been on the Wrestling with Johners podcast before, so really looking forward to breaking down Elimination Chamber with this guest. And I've got Brian Waters on the phone, or via Skype, as a matter of fact. You can probably see him in the video there if you're watching via YouTube or listening via audio. But Brian, good afternoon. Thank you for coming on the Wrestling with Johners podcast. How are you today?
I'm good, John. I appreciate the honor of allowing me. I appreciate you allowing me. I'm honored to be here. I always love talking wrestling. I appreciate your support. I really enjoy your show, so it's an honor to be right here.
Oh, well, likewise. And as I said to you off air, I'm a big fan of your show. I've seen a lot of your videos and a lot of your YouTube videos, and I'm particularly familiar with the Wrestling Realm. Now, that's a podcast or YouTube platform that you have currently. Tell me a little bit about your creative outlet then, Brian, because I know you're involved in a couple of things, aren't you? You've got the Wrestling Realm, which I'm more familiar with, but tell us about your weekly shows, about any co-hosts or guest hosts that you regularly host your shows with, and kind of what sort of topics or subjects they tend to focus on whenever you do these shows.
Yes, absolutely. So the Wrestling Realm was created in 2011 by myself and my co-host, the real Dwayne Allen. We created the show while we were in college at Morgan State University as an opportunity for us to get better at television production. So the Wrestling Realm gave us that outlet, and the idea around the show was to simply build upon just talking wrestling. We love wrestling. We wanted to talk about it from a different perspective. It was deemed a show for the intelligent wrestling fans. Now, wrestling of superior intellect, leading the wrestling fan revolution. We've come from a world that a lot of us was teased for loving this business. And we wanted to let people know, hey, guess what? We're not wrestlers, but it's cool to love wrestling. And that's what we did. And that's what we do. A lot of times we have the last show we did is Vince McMahon losing a step. So we have some shows coming out, but Dwayne is like very creative. So you may have seen the Ric Flair promo, one of our favorites, the NWO promo, where we pay homage to the NWO paid promotions. That's how we brought the Wrestling Realm back. When I went to work at ESPN in Connecticut, I was out of Baltimore and we wasn't side by side for a couple of years. So that gave us an opportunity to say, hey, we're coming back, and boom, let's hit them with with this. So
yeah, absolutely love the Wrestling Realm. But it's really good production values. As I said to you off there, I love your studio. I love your backdrops and everything, all the kind of effort you put into your artwork as well, your graphics. So you say you've been doing this for 9 years. That's quite impressive, because podcasts have really kind of exploded onto the scene in the last 4 or 5 years. But what was the podcast scene like when you started out in 2011 then? Must have been completely different to the way it is now.
Man, it was, it's a lot, because so when we first started, you had a few shows out there, but Blog Talk Radio was real heavy then. Yeah. So I did a show. It's called the Dungeon edition of the Wrestling Realm, and that was a weekly show. We would take updates, just do different topics, and that was just strictly audio. Where the Realm was where Dwayne and I would come together, and we would pitch different topics, and we would talk about that. And then we kind of went on a break, one to finish school. Then we came back for season 3. Then we did one episode, then we kind of took a break, but we still would do stuff via social media. Shout out to our friends at the Flex Zone. They would ask us to come on their show, so we would come together. So people knew, we got both of them. We got the Realm in. But while I was gone, before I moved back to Baltimore, Dwayne had did a rebranding where he changed the logo around, he changed the colors, and that gave us an opportunity. So when in 2017, we were able to put together some shows and come back. So, but yeah, like you said, the podcast scene was definitely different. And then I decided to break it down with Brian H podcast as a part of the Wrestling Realm, because one of the things we wanted to do was have you have the Wrestling Realm YouTube channel, but we wanted to give you different things to come there for. If you wanted to hear about wrestling for the culture, the wrestlers of color, boom, you got that. If you wanted to see like quick videos, quick promo videos of us acting crazy or doing wrestling promos, boom, you got that. But then if you wanted a weekly show, boom, you got that. But if you wanted a topic show, you got that as well.
Yeah, there's so much to offer and so much available via your shows. Where can my listeners kind of find these shows? What podcast platforms are they available on? I'm guessing that you've got a YouTube channel. Give a bit of a shout out to where we can actually find some of your fantastic content then, Brian.
Absolutely. You can go on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. We're right there. Just search the Wrestling Realm and you'll get you'll get the podcast, the weekly. The YouTube show where it's the real Dwayne Allen and I talking, that's only exclusive to YouTube. But the podcast, the weekly breakdown of everything, that's Break It Down with Brian H. You get that right on YouTube. Any podcast platform. And as well as some interviews as well.
Yeah, and we'll make sure that the links to all of your channels and YouTube channels are in the description to this episode. So if you do want to find out more about Brian and his content in the wrestling realm, just click into the description of this podcast and click on all the links that will be there. But tell us a little bit about your love for pro wrestling then, Brian. Before we speak about Elimination Chamber, when did you kind of first become a wrestling fan? And have you been a lifelong wrestling fan? Can you remember kind of back then, the early days when you first clapped eyes on pro wrestling for the first time?
Wow, man. So, a lot of people
right back now.
Yeah. So anybody who's listening to this that knows me, they already know where I'm going with this. When my mother was pregnant with me, she was on bed rest for a little bit, and the doctor told her, don't get up. So my dad and my grandfather and my uncle were wrestling fans, two of my uncles. And a lot of times they would leave the TV on. I was born in 1986 and all TVs didn't have remotes back then. No. So they would leave the TV on the channel with wrestling on. So my mother hated wrestling growing up because everybody was always watching it. Well, around this time, it's the Hulkamania era. And she got hooked. So every week she would watch wrestling. She said every time wrestling would come on, her stomach would start jumping because it was me kicking. And that was the moment she knew I was going to be a boy. So when I was born, a funny story, my Uncle Troy, who was my mother's youngest brother, we're about 11 years apart. So I was always under him. As a matter of fact, he taught me how to play drums. He was always watching wrestling and I would be under him. But before I was born, he said, "Name your baby Junkyard Dog." And she was like, "I'm not naming my child that." But, but probably my first memory I can really remember is probably WrestleMania 6 because, this is 1994. And then I'm just talking as far as like my mind going back to it. And I remember, my grandfather getting in the car with him and Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan sitting back and forth, talking about the crisscross, and my grandfather describing that as we was getting ready to go home to watch WrestleMania 6.
Oh, that's a fantastic story. It really is. So you've really been a fan since before you were born then, Brian, to be honest.
Yeah, incredible. My mother had went back to school and she actually wrote about that in one of her papers.
Oh, that's great. And who were some of your wrestling heroes, some of your wrestling idols, would you say? Who have you kind of always gravitated towards as far as wrestlers are concerned?
Hulk Hogan, that's for sure. I'm still a Hulkamaniac, and I'll just leave it at that. He follows the wrestling realm, so that's really cool. Bret the Hitman Hart, that was my next favorite. Yeah. But the funny thing is, and then, The Rock. But the funny thing is, I never thought I would be like somebody would surpass them on my ranking. And I have to tell you, man, in 2013, there was a guy who captivated the audience like none other. And I think you may know where I'm going with this one.
I think I know where you're going.
And I see you have a hat that has the New Orleans. And this man won the championship at WrestleMania 30, and that's Daniel Bryan.
Oh, yeah.
I listened to him on Chris Jericho's podcast, and for some reason, I felt connected to him when he talked about his love for pro wrestling. And Daniel Bryan then became my all-time favorite wrestler. And I was like, wow, I never thought anybody would pass Hogan. Because, the real Dwayne Allen always makes fun of me about it. Sure, I like Macho Man. I like the Ultimate Warrior. Mr. Perfect is one of my people who's not like, was never a world champion, but like one of my low-key favorites. So I love those guys. But Daniel Bryan's my overall favorite now. But growing up, it was without a shadow of a doubt, Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to hear that, because my also favorite wrestler besides Ric Flair is also Daniel Bryan. So that's fantastic to hear. And similar to yourself, from 2010 when he first appeared on WWE TV as part of the NXT kind of game show. That's when I first kind of caught eyes on him, really. And then I kind of tracked back and caught a lot of his indie career through through YouTube and various DVDs. But then around the same time, 2011, 2012, 2013, he really caught my imagination. I was a big part of the kind of the Yes movement. And then when he won the world title, New Orleans 2014, WrestleMania 30, that's got to be one of the highlights of my wrestling fandom. And then I was there in 2018 for WrestleMania 34. That was a hell of
nice.
but because that was his return match as well. That was only a month or so after he came back out of retirement after his issues with his concussions. So he returns in New Orleans 2018. I was there, went over there, my first ever Mania. My first time to the States, and it was a fantastic occasion. Of course, you had Kurt Angle's return match, Ronda Rousey's debut. It was a fantastic occasion. But really loved my experience out there in New Orleans. Have you been to any WrestleManias yourself, Brian? Bearing in mind we're kind of getting close to WrestleMania, only a few weeks out. So what WrestleManias have you been to?
My first one was WrestleMania 28, and I have to admit, at that time, I loved Daniel Bryan, but he wasn't my number one guy. Yeah. I was in Baltimore, and I was at the show when he won the world championship, and I remember going crazy. And he came out, shook our hands, and I shook his hand. But WrestleMania 28. Rock and Cena, that was my first WrestleMania. And then I went to WrestleMania 33, which is kind of, I want to say, race now, because that was a night where I just knew that was the Undertaker's last match. John Cena proposed to Nikki Bella, and none of that's happening. So exactly. It's nothing like it. I've told all my friends that I want them to experience that at least one time in their life. I wanted to go this year, but then I was like, you know what? Not this year. Next year, it's already been canceled. I'm not going because it falls right on my wife's birthday. And I thought I was going to be out of town for her birthday this year. My friend Glenn from the Wrestling Marks of Excellence told me. He said, well, now that you're not traveling for a birthday this year, you can go to Mania next year in LA. I said, let's wait and see.
There we go. And I'm quite curious to know about, what's your WrestleMania tradition? So when you sit down, I'm guessing in front of the TV to watch it live, do you have snacks that you have to have, or do you have a particular tradition that you have to follow when it comes to WrestleMania? Do you have any kind of WrestleMania traditions that my listeners might be keen to know about?
Well, no traditions yet. Last year was the first WrestleMania after we had bought our home. So I had all my friends over, and my dad, my uncle who got me into wrestling as well, and my kids, and we were all right here when Kofi Kingston won the championship. Yeah. So tears were shed, a lot of cheers, So having my friends and my cousins and my family here, and I think I might have an encore. I'm gonna see what the wife says, but I think I might do that again this year. So, but leading up to WrestleMania, I always got to watch, believe it or not, WrestleMania 9. I know a lot of people don't like it. I love it. Hogan won the title again, as a 6-year-old, I cannot watch it from an adult's eyes. That's the one show I would refuse to watch as adult eyes. I watched it growing up. I had 4 wrestling tapes: WrestleMania 9, WrestleMania 11, Survivor Series 95, which was also had World War III on that same tape, and then Royal Rumble 96. So I would watch those every day after school. So WrestleMania 9, I almost know the whole commentary by heart, word for word. So I watched that. I watched WrestleMania 15 because I can remember the build-up in middle school for Austin Rock. WrestleMania 17 is the last one I watched with my grandmother. WrestleMania 28 is one that I watched. So I have the end of WrestleMania 19 because while everybody loves 17, I personally think 19 was better. I mean, you're talking 5 main event matches. So that's what I do generally leading up to WrestleMania. One year, I was not excited for WrestleMania 31, and I just thought it was going to be a bad WrestleMania that I had a nerve to go back from WrestleMania 1 all the way to 30 and watch them in their entirety. I will never do that again.
No, that is a marathon and a half. It really is. But WrestleMania
It took me 2 months, 6 weeks actually.
But WrestleMania 31 was actually a good show, and I don't think I enjoyed it as much watching it live. But then in retrospect, I've watched it many times since then, and I really have enjoyed it. Kind of the nostalgia with Sting being there, NWO DX, and then you had the big cash in at the very end. So like it was and that RKO from the curb stomp as well. That was WrestleMania 31. That's a moment that would go down in folklore. But yeah, that's a good WrestleMania. So we're all getting very hyped for WrestleMania. And of course, the last pay-per-view before WrestleMania is the pay-per-view we're about to talk about now then, Brian, and that's Elimination Chamber. So it took place less than 24 hours ago. This is Monday when we're recording this, so it's only kind of less than 24 hours ago that it took place. And it wasn't such a bad show. I've heard some reviews by other content creators putting a bit of a downer on it. And yes, it kind of had its good moments and its bad moments. But we spoke a bit about Daniel Bryan there being your favourite wrestler and one of my favourite wrestlers. And he started the show. So the main show was Daniel Bryan versus Drew Gulak. So just to go through some of the highlights here, Brian, and then I get your thoughts on it. But this was quite a stiff kind of back and forwards match. It was a very strong style match. There was plenty of mat wrestling to start the match between these two. And hands down, it was one of the best pro wrestling matches I've actually seen in a long time between these two. There was a suplex spot fairly early on where Daniel Bryan attempted to dump Drew Gulak over the top rope. However, Gulak kind of held on and took Daniel Bryan over with him. So that was quite impressive. They both landed hard on the floor on the outside. There was a scary high-angled suplex spot where Drew Gulak, he virtually dropped Daniel Bryan on his head and back of his neck. Daniel Bryan rolled to the outside to recover, just making it back in time before the referee's 10 count. But we're all aware of Daniel Bryan's neck and head injuries and concussion issues over the years, so that was quite worrying. Gulak then nailed Bryan with a reverse suplex, and then he kind of clapped on the dragon sleeper, the kind of the Gru lock, I think he calls it. But Daniel Bryan reversed it into the yes lock. And eventually, after a very hard fought, very stiff, action-packed opener, Drew Gulak tapped to the yes-lock. I think he actually passed out from the yes-lock, as a matter of fact. After the match, Daniel Bryan kind of pointed towards Drew Gulak to kind of share his praise to Drew Gulak. I think Drew Gulak is from the town where Elimination Chamber was taking place last night. But this was a real strong style wrestling match. It was very mat based to start off with. It was quite hard hitting and quite high impact. Them suplexes onto Daniel Bryan were quite hard to watch at times, to be honest with you. But this was a really good match, Brian, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this opening match between Drew Gulak and Daniel Bryan.
So I had no doubts that it would be a good match. Kind of wish that they had built this and made this a WrestleMania match, because you think of WrestleMania, and you got a guy like Daniel Bryan, a guy like Drew Gulak, two great mat technicians, but also strong style. So I was wishing that they made this, but nonetheless, it didn't disappoint at all. So I was happy with it.
Yeah, definitely. And a good win for Daniel Bryan. He did take a lot of punishment in this match. And I thought the same as you. You know, I'd like to see these two wrestle again. You know, have they got, do they have enough faith in Drew Gulak to put him in a WrestleMania match with Daniel Bryan? But then I'm kind of thinking towards WrestleMania, and who do you think would be an ideal opponent for Daniel Bryan at Mania? Because it's nobody obvious at the moment, is there? There's no obvious feuds going on. Daniel Bryan's had his feud with The Fiend. He's now got this mini feud going on with Drew Gulak. Do you think Daniel Bryan's at risk of not being in a featured match at Mania in 4 weeks' time, Brian?
I think so, honestly, unless you do a rematch and Daniel Bryan puts him over. You know, that's the only way I can see it.
Yeah. Like I said,
But you gotta have him on the card. I mean, sorry, but
no,
he's a
you've
big
got to.
star, so you gotta have him on the big. You gotta have him on the card. And that's the thing that drives me crazy about the WWE sometimes is I like those big buildups. This Orton Edge thing is perfect. So I want to see majority of the Mania buildups just like that.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. We'll probably find out more this coming week, especially SmackDown on Friday, to see whether there's any further development between these two, or maybe a little inkling as to who Daniel Bryan's opponent might be in Tampa in 4 weeks' time. Anyway, that was a really good opener. Match number 2, however, was just as good. I really enjoyed it. It was Andrade, the current United States champion, up against Humberto Carrillo. So now, we've seen these two in the ring several times together, Brian. They've had quite a few matches on weekly TV, on Monday Night Raw in particular, but they always put on a great match. They always do deliver. I thought this was a hell of a match as well. Both wrestlers keeping up the momentum from the previous match. Humberto got a close near fall from a super Hurricane Rana early on. Andrade got a 2 count from a double running knees into the corner. That's always impressive when he pulls it off. Zelina Vega, she pulled up the mats on the outside with Humberto reversing an attempted hammerlock DDT from Andrade onto the exposed floor, and Andrade was backdropped instead of being able to hit his DDT, of course. Carrillo then nailed a brilliant senton over the top rope, going over, not just over the top rope, but over the top of the referee to connect with Andrade outside and onto the floor. That was pretty impressive. However, Andrade managed to retain his championship after reversing a roll-up into a roll-up of his own with a handful of tights as well to get the 1, 2, 3. And as I mentioned, this was a pretty good match, an action-packed match. These two always deliver in the ring, and they're always a lot of fun. Now, thinking ahead to Mania again, I'm kind of thinking, who might Andrade face? Obviously, he's still the United States champion. There's quite a few rumors and rumblings out there, Brian, that it could potentially be a Latino or a Latin 4-way between Andrade, Humberto Carrillo, throwing their Angel Garza, and then maybe Rey Mysterio. That would be a pretty tasty match. But give us your thoughts on what went down between these two last night, and then thinking ahead to Mania and who the possible opponents could be for Andrade.
Well, I thought this was a great match. The
agreed.
thing about Andrade, I think he is such a star, but when he got suspended and we saw Angel Garza with Zelina Vega, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not missing Andrade, to be honest with you. I like the guy, but with Garza right there, I wasn't missing him. Then last week on Raw, you saw Garza kind of taking the shine from Andrade. So I was happy that he was far away from as possible. Andrade kind of got to remind people who he is, and we can go from there. They need, in my opinion, keep Andrade away from Garza as possible because he's going to take his heat. So with that, I do think we do get that 4-way match, and I think Garza leaves with the win because I see star in him.
Yeah, he's just oozing charisma, isn't he? He's just oozing machismo. he's got the looks, he's got the smile, he's got the personality, and
I hope he stays a heel.
Yeah, true. I think he's so much more effective as a heel as well. I think they have teased a little bit of a baby face with Garza, but I'd much prefer him as a heel. I think he's arrogant, and I think he works well. But it'll be interesting to see what happens, especially the chemistry between him and Andrade, especially if Zelina is managing both wrestlers at the same time. That could cause a bit of friction, especially if they were in the ring together in a possible 4-way at Mania. That could be quite interesting to watch to see how that plays out. But Angel Garza, I think if he's involved in that US Championship match at Mania, I agree with you. I think he's leaving with the belt. But some good points that you bring up there, most definitely. And then that leads us to match number 3, which was the first of 2 Elimination Chamber matches. This was a tag team Elimination Chamber match. It was for the Smackdown Tag Team titles as well. So the 6 teams that were involved, you got the current Smackdown Tag Team Champions, Miz and Morrison, of course. Then you got Robert Roode and Dolph Ziggler, Heavy Machinery, the Lucha House Party, the New Day, and the Usos. So quite a strong lineup. I suppose the only kind of odd team out, you could say, might be the Lucha House Party. But you had Kofi Kingston and Big E. They started this match inside the ring with the Usos, Jimmy and Jay, of course. Lince Dorado, he was quite impressive. He was the first one to kind of exit the pods. Lucha House Party were the first team to kind of exit their pods into the match, and Dorado and Gran Metalik, they used the top of the pods quite a bit with some high-flying antics. That was fun to watch. There was a superb Hurricane Rana, super Hurricane Rana, as a matter of fact, from the top of the pod from Gran Metalik onto John Morrison. That was quite an impressive spot to watch. The fans responded with a "This is awesome" chant. Then ever popular Otis Dozovic and Tucker, they were out next for Heavy Machinery. Lince Dorado, he impressed everybody. I think this is possibly one of the highlights of the match, if not the night, when he was hanging on to the top of the cage, swinging backwards and forwards, and he eventually let go to do like a swinging, what would you call it, like a shooting star press onto all the wrestlers down inside the ring. That was pretty damn awesome. However, it didn't last too much longer. The Lucha House Party were the first team to be eliminated. Tucker then proved why he's no slouch. He did a huge senton off of one of the other pods onto everyone down below. Then Otis, he goes to seek a bit of revenge on Dolph Ziggler. We all know what's going on between him, Dolph Ziggler, and Mandy Rose, of course, but ends up charging right into one of the plexiglass pods, crashing through the pod and out to the floor on the outside. Tucker is soon eliminated with a super kick, glorious DDT combo from Rude and Dolph, and that spelt the end for Heavy Machinery, unfortunately. Ziggler and Rude were eliminated thanks to stereo splashes from the Usos from opposite corners. That was really impressive as well. The fight continues with Miz and Morrison eliminating Kofi in the process, and the New Day are out of the match. Kofi misses a big splash off of one of the pods as well, but there's quite a climactic last few minutes of the match. The Usos getting close near fall following a pair of super kicks to the Miz and Morrison. However, after Miz and Morrison, they retained their Smackdown Tag Team Championships with a double pinning combination with some extra leverage from the top rope for the Miz and John Morrison there. So, Brian, I don't think this will go down as one of the best chamber matches in history, but I thought it was quite good. It had some highlights. You obviously had the high flying spots. You had was it Lince Dorado, who swung from the top of the cage for the shooting star press, and that dive off the top from Tucker, and Otis was of course the crowd favorite when he came out, but the win in the end goes to Miz and Morrison. They retain their Smackdown Tag Team Championships and they go on to WrestleMania to defend. So what did you think of the match? Like say, you've probably seen quite a few chamber matches in your time as a fan. How does this one rank?
Oh man, probably middle of the pack, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It'd be one that was like, I think a few years from now we'll be like, oh yeah, that did happen. It won't be Shawn Michaels winning the championship. It won't be Triple H retaining the championship, even though Goldberg had a dominant night. It won't even be Jack Swagger surprising everybody and winning the number one contendership for the championship. So I don't think it's going to have like those kind of moments. But it is what it is. They had to have two chambers. I think it made more sense for this tag title than the Raw tag titles if they was going to do it that way.
Yeah.
Is this the first year? Yeah, I was going to say, is this the first year where neither chamber matches had world title implications?
I think you make a really good point there. I think you're right. I think this is the first year where either the WWE or Universal or World Heavyweight Championship hasn't been involved in an Elimination Chamber match. So it's a really good point that you bring up there. And it was quite different. I mean, I was going to mention at the top of the show, there was some big names not part of this show as a whole. You didn't have Drew McIntyre. There was no Brock Lesnar. There was no Roman Reigns. So quite a few big players weren't part of this pay-per-view that are not normally missing from a pay-per-view. But you make a really good point there. But I thought it's quite refreshing, maybe, not to have a world title involved in Elimination Chamber, to shake things up a little bit. And I thought that this kind of tag Elimination Chamber match was actually not too bad. But so the next match, Brian, was AJ Styles versus Aleister Black. So AJ Styles versus Aleister Black in a no DQ match, Brian. And of course, AJ Styles, he came out with the OC, Gallows and Anderson. Now, this this was probably the most anticipated match that I was most looking forward to going into this pay-per-view. It was a bit of a dream match, really. Aleister Black, AJ Styles, two very exciting, very technical wrestlers. But what were your kind of expectations going into this one? I'm guessing that you're a fan of AJ and Aleister Black. Was you looking forward to this one?
Yeah, I thought it was solid. I know I like build-ups, but this one was one of those that I didn't mind that it didn't have a long stretch build-up. Just because, quite frankly, I mean, it was honestly a transitional match for AJ Styles because we know that he's probably getting the Undertaker, even if they do a 2-on-3 match. But I like this because Aleister Black can work in the ring. I still think the character doesn't really translate as well to the main roster. I don't think it's as marketable, but there's no denying when if you put him in the ring, that guy can work. And same with AJ Styles. So this is one of those matches, though. I'm going to go back and watch again because, like I said, it was wedding anniversary, so didn't see it like all the way through. But I'm going to go back and watch this one again.
Yeah, and it's one of those matches that during the actual match part of it, before the shenanigans at the end, it was actually quite a good match, quite a solid match. AJ, he got out a kendo stick, which he utilized on Black's knee early on. Black then brought out a table from underneath the ring, which came into play towards the end of the match. Aleister Black almost broke the kendo stick that AJ was using earlier. He almost broke the kendo stick across the body of AJ. There was some vicious strikes using the kendo stick on AJ Styles there before AJ went back to the leg, which he followed up with a phenomenal forearm and a brainbuster for a 2 count. As far as the match went, I thought it was a good match, and it was stiff, just like the match between Daniel Bryan and Drew Gulak. It was quite stiff and hard hitting. I think that was a theme throughout most of the matches on this card. To be honest with you, it was quite a hard hitting, stiff match. Both of the guys gave as good as they got, of course. AJ then went for a tombstone, clearly sending out a message to the Undertaker, but that was reversed into a roll up by Aleister Black. Black eventually drives AJ through the table on the outside with a Meteora. So I said at the beginning that the table was bound to come into play, and it did. But before Black could finish off AJ, Gallows and Anderson, they come into the ring, dropping Black with their magic killer. Then Bryan, the crowd finally came alive. They were quiet for most of this match, but they finally came alive when they heard the Undertaker's gong. The lights went out. The lights came back on again with Taker, his hands around the throats of Gallows and Anderson, with them both on their knees on the canvas. Then AJ Styles attempted a phenomenal forearm from behind to kind of sneak attack the Undertaker, but the Undertaker was quick to react, caught AJ Styles in mid-flight by the throat, executed an awesome power choke slam, and then from there the lights went out. The Undertaker disappeared. Aleister Black came back with his finishing move, Black Mass, the roundhouse kick, hooked the leg, got the 1, 2, 3, and a win for Aleister Black. So this was a fun match. Some shenanigans towards the end there. Some might say that it was overbooked potentially, but I enjoyed this match. Like I said, I thought that the wrestling part of it, the actual match between these two, was quite solid. The interference, you knew you were going to get it because you had Gallows and Anderson on the outside from the off, so you knew that they were going to get involved at some point during this match. The added bonus of having the Undertaker come out and kind of do the choke slam to AJ Styles, and then Aleister Black with the Black Mass to finish the match. So I enjoyed this. I thought it was really, really fun. But to give us your thoughts on this one, and you mentioned earlier, where it could potentially go at WrestleMania. Could it be a 1-on-1 between Taker and AJ, or could it possibly be a 3-on-2 handicap match if you throw in the OC and Aleister Black into the mix? So lots to unpick here and unravel, Brian. But what were your thoughts on how this went down?
Yeah, I enjoyed it though. Now as we're going over this show, I'm realizing like this whole show wasn't a bad show at all. Will it be memorable down the line? Probably not. But it was a solid show, just like this match. This was a solid match. And it was good to see the Undertaker there. It's definitely a treat for the fans in Philly because he doesn't go everywhere. So to lead this build up to WrestleMania, I thought this was great.
Yeah, agreed. And the Undertaker looked good. And of course, we saw the Undertaker, the Super Showdown in Saudi Arabia last Thursday, where he did much the same. He choked slam AJ Styles. It looks like we've got these two going to meet in the ring at WrestleMania. I quite like the idea of throwing Aleister Black in there, having Aleister Black alongside the Undertaker against all three members of the OC, Gallows, Anderson, and AJ Styles. I think that could be a bit of a spectacle, something different, and a bit of a platform for Aleister Black as well, and to get him involved, to get the Undertaker rub as well, to get a little bit of a rub from the Prince of Darkness. But that should be a pretty fun match, and I'm sure that that's the way they're heading, especially with how it all turned out on Sunday night. But let's have a look at the next match then, Brian. So the Street Profits, a particular favourite of mine, really big fan of those. I've enjoyed the Street Profits from their NXT days, going up against Seth Rollins and Murphy. Don't call him Buddy anymore. They've got rid of his first name. It's just Murphy from now on. And this is for the Raw Tag Team Championships. So, of course, the Street Profits, they won the tag team titles at Raw last Monday. So I've got to say, besides enjoying Montez Ford and Angelo Dawkins, I felt this match was a bit flat, to be honest with you. Big fan of Dawkins and Ford. I thought they were fantastic in this match. You had the Viking Raiders. They came out to neutralize AOP, and AOP and the Viking Raiders, they fought to the back. I've got to give credit to Angelo Dawkins. He's got one of the best hot tags in the business, in my opinion. And when he gets that tag, he's like a steam train. He just rolls through the opposition. But so then we saw Kevin Owens. He came through the crowd with a big bag of popcorn, sits at ringside, throws some popcorn in Seth Rollins' face. Seth Rollins gets put out of action by being kind of steamrolled into the crowd barrier at ringside. And then you had Dawkins and Ford. They finished the match with a spinebuster and frog splash combo onto Murphy to get the pin and to retain the Raw Tag Team Championship. So I thought this was a fun match. Maybe a bit of a surprising ending, but Kevin Owens getting involved, almost certainly setting up a match involving him and Seth Rollins, possibly at Mania. But Kevin Owens finished the proceedings by giving Seth Rollins a stunner for his troubles. So a bit of a fun way to kind of end this segment.
I like how you worded that.
Yeah. But give us your thoughts on how this went down then. It was okay. And most importantly, the Street Profits retained and looks like they're going to be taking the gold into Mania.
I honestly probably would have rather seen this as a 6-man tag if he wasn't going to have the Street Profits win the titles on this show. I understand, you wanted that pop for Raw sometimes, but I thought it would have been a nice touch if they could have won the titles in the pay-per-view as opposed to just doing the rematch. But it's one of those things. Also, like you said, it was just to get us to Mania. It could have been better, but I always thought that Rollins and Murphy were the wrong tag champs in that group anyway, but maybe, I don't know. I just don't know why they went that route, putting the titles on them. Maybe just to get, I don't know.
Well, I'm guessing they had nothing better for Seth Rollins, so they thought, well, let's throw him in there with Murphy, give him the tag titles. But I do agree with you. I thought AOP, they're the natural tag team from that faction, from that stable, and I thought AOP should have been given the opportunity. But maybe now that things are breaking down and Seth Rollins looks to be going one-on-one potentially with Kevin Owens at Mania, that could give a little bit of an open door to AOP, to future tag matches, future tag title matches, and who knows? We could see Kevin Owens versus Seth Rollins in a singles match. We could see the Street Profits versus AOP at Mania. So that will be a really good match, and a match we've not seen before.
I think that's what we're getting. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that will be a good match. And maybe with what happened with the Viking Raiders, throw the Viking Raiders in there, maybe turn into a 3-way match to get even more individuals involved. But it's interesting. And tonight on Raw, I'm sure we'll find out more about where it's going for the Raw Tag Team titles. But a win and a retain for the Profits. So I'm very happy about that. The second to last match on the card, there was a 3-on-1 handicap match. It was Intercontinental Champion Braun Strowman going in there there against Shinsuke Nakamura, Sami Zayn, and Cesaro. And I think the stipulation to this was if either Sami Zayn, Cesaro, or Nakamura could get the pinfall over Strowman, then whoever did get the pin would walk out as the IC champion. So quite an interesting stipulation, quite a fun kind of little intriguing thread that goes into this match. But Sami Zayn spent most of the match running away from Braun Strowman while the other two did their best to keep the big man down. And in kind of the shock of the night, the heels came out on top thanks to a Kinshasa from Nakamura, followed by a double suplex on Strowman by Nakamura and Cesaro. Sami Zayn put the nail in the coffin with a hell of a kick and got the pinfall. And Sami Zayn is our new Intercontinental Champion, pinning the big man Braun Strowman. So Sami Zayn seemed elated. He seemed over the moon to get the pinfall and to be the new Intercontinental Champion. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that's his first WWE singles title since he was in NXT. A fun little match here. I was quite surprised that Sami Zayn or the heels came out on top. But give us your thoughts on this one, Brian. It was quite an interesting match, and Braun Strowman no longer the Intercontinental Champion.
Yeah, I thought this was good. I really enjoy Sami Zayn winning the championship, especially the way his character is. He's the most vocal out of the group. But that IC title fits him. Workhorse. He's a guy who can wrestle, he can go, he can put on great matches, and he can talk his trash. I was happy about that. I liked the ending. It made so much sense. So, you get the big man down. All you need him down is for 3 seconds. Got him down for 3 seconds. We got a new champion. I hope this leads to Shinsuke Sami turning on Shinsuke, or somehow disseminating that so we can get that full circle, because we know the match these two put on at TakeOver Dallas.
Oh, Brian, you've just reminded me one of my all-time favorite matches. That match, that's one match that I always watch every year in the lead up to WrestleMania. We're speaking about WrestleMania traditions, and that's one of my WrestleMania traditions is to put that match on the network. But yes, and wouldn't that be awesome to see those two potentially go at it in a Mania match? It leads to many interesting possibilities, and where Cesaro might factor into it as well, and whether Braun Strowman is entirely out of the picture. And there could be quite an interesting storyline leading into Mania. But I do like your idea best of potentially seeing Nakamura versus Sami Zayn somewhere down the line.
Yeah,
that would be pretty sweet. That would be pretty sweet.
Let's do it.
That leads us nicely to the main event then, Brian, the women's Elimination Chamber match. So no championship up for grabs in this one, unlike the match earlier with the Smackdown Tag Team titles. This was for a number one contender spot. So the winner of this match would go on to face Becky Lynch, the man, for the Raw Women's Tag Team Championship at Mania. So the 6 women that were involved in this match, you had Ruby Wyatt, Liv Morgan, Natalya, Asuka, Sarah Morgan, and Shayna Baszler. So when I first heard this match was announced and the competitors involved, I was a little bit surprised and rather underwhelmed at some of the names mentioned. Certainly Sarah Morgan, Liv Morgan, Sarah, what's Sarah's surname? I can't remember.
Logan.
Sarah Logan. That's right, not Morgan, Logan. And of course, Ruby Wyatt, she's just come back from an injury. But I thought the match was okay. I enjoyed the opening exchange between Ruby Riott and Natalya. I liked how the camera work was quite up close and showed a lot of the bumps and a lot of the pain that the wrestlers were going through when they were experiencing the bumps on the outside, kind of on the, because it used to be just a steel grate, didn't it? But recently they've covered it over with the mats. But I'm sure it still hurts like hell when you take a bump onto kind of the outside of the Elimination Chamber. Sarah Logan was next out of the pod. She drop kicks Natalya into the plexiglass of the pod, so that looked pretty painful. Ruby Riott gets powerbombed onto the padded metal grate on the outside of the ring. Sarah Logan dropped Ruby Riott and Natalya with a crossbody off of the pod. That was quite impressive. I think Natalya took a bit of a nasty bump there. Then Shayna Baszler was next out of her pod. She quickly eliminates Sarah Logan. Ruby Riott and Natalia, all with the Karafuda clutch. Then there was a few minutes where nothing happened. It was almost a bit of an awkward few minutes waiting for the clock to tick down. The fans were booing and chanting boring. But then we had Liv Morgan. She came out. She suffered at the hands of Shayna Baszler and the Karafuda clutch. And then we waited again, and Asuka was the last one out of her pod. And this was a good exchange, probably the most competitive segment of this match. Asuka, I think she even locked in the Asuka lock, but Shayna Baszler rolled to safety and then got in control again. And then she was able to lock in the Karafuda clutch for the 5th time, and Asuka passed out, and that was the end of the match. So it was a very dominant match by Shayna Baszler. Some awkward moments while we were waiting for the clock to tick down on a couple of occasions, but when the opponent was facing Shayna made short work of it, and the Karafuda clutch, they're definitely putting that over as a bit of a killer finishing move. And Shayna wins the match. She now goes on as the #1 contender to Becky's Raw Women's Championship. So, Brian, it was a bit of a strange Elimination Chamber match, totally different to the first one we saw earlier on. But give us your kind of thoughts, break it down for me on this one that we saw last night.
Well, John, here's the thing. You got Becky Lynch, who's the man, who's been the champion. I mean, we're going on with 365 days soon. Yeah. And everybody that you've been lining up for her, she's been knocking them down. So you have to present someone that's strong enough to make us say, wait a minute, she can beat Becky. You did that with Asuka. You know, the story you told was that was the one person Becky couldn't beat. She beat her. So now who's next? We done seen her beat Charlotte Flair. We done seen all that. This is good. I liked it, honestly. I like the fact that her and, that Shayna looked so dominant. Yes. This match probably shouldn't have been the main event. But then again, unless you was going to put Daniel Bryan and Gulak as the main event because of the wrestling history, especially both of those guys having some great ground they made in Philly, it had to be, and we understand with WWE, especially as far as this being Women's International Month. So I didn't hate it as much as the internet did, but I thought, I understood the story that was going on here, and I'm still not so guaranteed Shayna wins the title at WrestleMania. I think she would, but it's just not a guarantee. But they made you believe that she could go out there and do it.
Yeah, it was a very dominant win for Shayna. But one thing that was very noticeable, and I'm sure that you caught this during your viewing of Elimination Chamber, was the crowd were very, very quiet during a lot of these matches. In particular, the main event, they were deathly silent. And you did get some boos as well, especially when there was long periods where nothing was going on during that match. But do you think that, the crowd could have been a bit more lively during some of these matches? And as we explained, some of the matches were pretty good. There was a lot of action. There was a lot of hard-hitting action. The matches were quite stiff in some cases. But do you think, that the crowd were at fault last night, or potentially that the wrestlers could have done more to draw the fans in?
Well, Philadelphia is a tough crowd, unfortunately. So, I'm not sure what they really could have did. Maybe they wanted Brock. You brought up that earlier, and I thought about it. I was like, wow. Literally, WWE's the top 4 stars were not there. Yeah. Brock, Roman, The Fiend, Cena. Brock, Roman, The Fiend, and Drew McIntyre. Then you add John Cena to the mix. So, their top tier stars wasn't there. And yeah, I'm a Daniel Bryan fan, but he's not being booked in that way right now. So that was another thing. So I think maybe the fans, even though they give us a card subject to change, they give us the match card beforehand, I think maybe they were a little disappointed that, and it was a Sunday night, which, you may have a heavier adult crowd there as opposed to a kids crowd because it is school year. So maybe that was a factor. So a lot of 18 to 35 demographic probably wanted something else. But, that's a WWE, what people don't realize. One thing I learned when I watched the behind the scenes when they showed the Royal Rumble of 2015 when Roman won was a lot of times they said, we're not going to change our plans because of one town. So I think even though they like when they go to Philly because they're passionate, they also don't they're not going to let Philly bully them into decisions.
Yeah. And having seen Elimination Chamber last night, Brian, has it kind of set you up more for WrestleMania? Do you feel more hyped for the grandest show of them all after watching last night's Elimination Chamber? Has it got you more excited, or do you think that will kind of come over the days and weeks leading up to April the 5th?
It's gonna come over the days leading up to it. There wasn't nothing really last night that really excited me about WrestleMania, to be honest with you. And maybe because every so many years there's like for me like a down year where it's just like, oh yeah, WrestleMania is coming. I haven't been like, oh my goodness, I can't wait. That will come though as we get closer.
Oh
But
yeah.
sometimes for me it starts at the Royal Rumble, and then sometimes it starts 2 weeks beforehand. Last year, even though we didn't know about Kofi Mania until I say probably February, last year made me excited, even when Kofi lost, because you just knew he's going to find a way to that match. So this year there wasn't really anything, unfortunately. I kind of wish they did, but part of me didn't wish they did give us a Roman Goldberg right away. But looking at what's on SmackDown, we all knew it was going to get Roman and Goldberg. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I must admit, coming out of Elimination Chamber, I'm a little bit more positive about this pay-per-view than many of the reports that I've read and listened to since last night. Having watched it, going into it with low expectations, I actually quite enjoyed the pay-per-view, especially
go.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. If you go in with low expectations, anything good is a bonus, I suppose. But, Daniel Bryan versus Drew Gulak, I think, was definitely the match of the night for me. What about yourself? What was the match of the night for you, and what was kind of some of the bigger highlights coming out of this one?
Well, you hit it right on the head, but I'll play the game that since you said it first, you took that one, I got to choose another one. So in that case, I'm going with Humberto and Andrade. I thought that was a great match, even though, and maybe you feel the same way, maybe you don't. I feel like Humberto's just misses something, but I can't put my finger on it.
Yeah, he needs a bit of Angel Garza's personality. I think that's what he's lacking.
Okay, yeah, and I know I didn't really care for his outfit, like the jacket, interest jacket or whatever. It looked like Creator Wrestler, but other than that, I think, but I do think that was my match of the night. If I couldn't choose Daniel Bryan, Drew Gulak.
Yeah, I also enjoyed the hell out of the Smackdown Tag Team Elimination Chamber match. I thought that was very good, and I'm interested to see kind of what match might come out of that leading into WrestleMania. What do you think about Heavy Machinery? Do you think that they're going to be involved in a tag title match at Mania? But Otis Dozovich, he's definitely getting over with the fans. It could be his time to shine. Could they be putting the titles on Otis and Tucker over in Tampa?
It's two ways you can do that. You could put them, you could have a fatal four-way tag team match for the titles, or maybe a triple threat match. Somehow, some way, you got to get Otis and Tucker against Rude and Ziggler with Mandy Rose there. Because something's going to happen. Either Mandy Rose is going to go full-fledged heel, or we're going to get the ultimate love moment, or they might surprise us and put her with Tucker, even though the reason why I said that wouldn't happen, because I do think there's money in Heavy Machinery with kids merchandise as far as toys, and you can put little trucks together and all that other jazz.
Oh yes, absolutely. I totally get where you're coming from. But all in all, I thought it was a good show. Like I said, I went in with low expectations, and I came out pleasantly surprised. I thought there was some good matches. But if you were to watch just the first two matches, Drew Gulak versus Daniel Bryan and Humberto Carrillo versus Andrade, I think that you could probably stop there and be satisfied. But I think those were definitely they peaked. It peaked after those two matches, in my opinion. But there we go. Brian, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Wrestling with Johners podcast to help me cover Elimination Chamber 2020 pay-per-view. We're well on the way to the road to WrestleMania now. We've got no more pay-per-views. We've only got a few more Raws and a few more Smackdowns in between now and April the 5th.
NXT.
And NXT, of course. I'll tell you what, NXT is my wheelhouse. NXT is my bread and butter. So I can't wait to be talking and watching more about NXT in the coming weeks. But Brian, if any of my listeners want to reach out to you and say hi, find you on social media, follow what you do creativity wise, Wrestling Realm and all that good stuff, where can they find you? Have you got some social media handles? Are you on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram? Where can we reach out and say hi to you, Brian?
Oh, simply just at Brian H. Waters. You know, that's my name. You can find me Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Search Brian H. Waters. Love to talk wrestling, so just don't be creepy. you know, like I'm not one that's not gonna complain about the product. You know, you got people that would sit up there and complain the whole time. Nah, yeah, I'll complain when necessary, but I try to be positive because at the end of the day, it's just wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have put it better myself. But thank you, Brian, for helping us out with this special review episode. And hopefully we can have you back on the show sometime in the future. It's been a pleasure to have you on, my friend. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, John.
No, you're very welcome. So please keep it tuned to the Wrestling with Johners podcast for all of your weekly NXT and AEW Dynamite updates. We, of course, do regular WWE and AEW pay-per-view reviews, exclusive interviews, and so much more. Please don't forget to check out our website, wrestlingwithjohners.com. We've got all of our podcast archive up there, our full list of interviews, vlogs, our archive of special articles, news updates, merchandise, social media links, and so much more. That's wrestlingwithjohners.com. So don't forget to subscribe to the podcast as well, so you don't miss out on a single episode and you can be notified every time a new episode drops. So from myself and from Brian, thank you to everybody that's listened to this, and we'll hopefully speak to you all again very, very soon.